Hello and welcome to Penmanship, a podcast about Australian writing culture. I'm your host, Andrew McMillen. Today's guest in episode 20 is Kathleen Noonan. For 13 years, she has written a column in the Saturday Courier-Mail named Last Word. It's a blank canvas where she is tasked with writing 1,000 words about whatever has caught her eye or piqued her interest out in the world that week. It seems no topic is too big or too small for this canvas. I've been reading her every Saturday for about 6 years, and that column is among the most consistently fascinating, moving and insightful pages I'll read all week. Besides being an eminently experienced and capable journalist, I have long wondered how Kathleen manages to write such wonderfully original material, based only on her careful observations and analysis of herself and other people. It's a brilliant trick, and her name has been near the top of my list since I first conceived of using penmanship as a vehicle to meet and interview my favourite Australian writers. I met Kathleen at her home in East Brisbane on a Monday morning in mid-March, where I was enthusiastically greeted by her white Jack Russell puppy, Basil, who was keen on playing with a stranger in his house while we chatted nearby Kathleen's writing desk. The sounds of suburbia were in chorus that morning, prompting her to shut the window and doors to avoid power tools and leaf blowers on a couple of occasions. Our conversation touches on how Kathleen manages to come up with fresh ideas for Last Word each week, how she decided to write a column about the recent passing of her beloved greyhound, which prompted an unexpected flood of reader mail, what led her to seek out a job as a cadet reporter in North Queensland, how she handled the tricky task of performing death knocks, and the advice that she tends to give when aspiring journalists contact her. Introducing Kathleen Noonan, journalist and a weekly columnist for the Courier-Mail. Kathleen Noonan, welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's just after 10 a.m. on a Monday morning. If you weren't here talking to me now, what would you be doing at this time of day?
I would be probably, doing an interview with someone, thinking about the column for next week. Yeah.
So I only know you through the prism of that column. Do you have other regular writing work that you have on the board? Or how does that work?
I used to have. I don't at the moment. I've been asked to write several books, but the books they've sort of sent me that are saying, the books sort of like this or in this sort of genre aren't the sort of books that I tend to want to write. So I've just been, finding my way through that. And that's a big commitment, writing a book. Like, I'm easily bored, so you've got to have a really good idea to start with.
That's right.
A column, it's 1,000 words. In a book, you're with for several years. Yeah. So I'm really very admiring of people who manage to write a book.
I'm very admiring of people who manage to write 1,000-word columns week in, week out, and not only make them good, but great. Like, to give you some context, I receive 4 newspapers each weekend, and I don't read everything, but I read all the features and arts material and some of the news, and your column over the last, 5 years has been probably the single most consistent aspect of that reading habit of mine. So I'm just constantly impressed by the range and depth of material that you cover, and I want to know how you do that.
Oh, that's very kind. I always say you've got a 1 in 3 strike rate. I've got a 1 in 3 strike rate, so I think 1 out of 3 you're happy with. You think, that was pretty good. That was a good idea. It was well executed. You gave yourself enough time, right? That's a good one. Maybe 1 in 3 is a good idea, but circumstances overtook you and you didn't give it enough time, whatever. And then 1 in 3 probably wasn't such a great idea to start with, but you still got to get it up in the end. So I think that's pretty much a strike rate. And like for most people anyway, when they're producing something, it's what you can do given the time you've got in the circumstances that you're in. So for me, that's with you've got a family, you've got other things going on in your life, and so I think if you're going to write a column or produce something every week, I used to bash myself up about, that wasn't good enough, but I think you've just got to go, okay, well, it is what it is this week, you know.
Not be too precious about making every sentence sing.
Oh, look, you'd love to. You know, you'd really love to. And I can certainly tell the ones that I've taken enough time over. If I'm looking back on something or looking for a file, and I'll find something, and I'll think, wow, I clearly had enough time there, or I clearly, took the time, or polished it or edited it as much as I should have. But you know, that's newspapers, and I'm being precious. I've got a weekly deadline, whereas you know, when you're a news reporter, you had a daily deadline. So that's a much harder gig. I'm always really impressed when I see a news report that I know would have been produced on the day, and it's also just beautifully written. I think that's talent. Yeah.
How do you decide what to write about each week? Do you have like a backlog of ideas, or just things that you jot down throughout the week that may crop up one day?
Yeah, there's probably columnists who are like, you know, 6 columns ahead, or they've got a whole heap sitting in the bottom drawer. That's not me. I'm not that sort of process type A personality. I'm just not like that. I've usually got ideas about, I'd like to do something on that. You know, I've just sort of got a couple of things in my head about, and you sort of magpie things along the way. You know, I'll just be going through and thinking, okay, that might be more timely that time, or I'll, you know, have gone to a talk or go to a gig or see a piece of theatre that I think, okay, well, that will inform that, or that will, I'll be able to use that. And sometimes you just, sometimes you have no ideas, but I guess I think that's where, from being a daily reporter, you just know you can't sit around waiting for inspiration. You know? Yeah. You've got to sit down and write, whether you've got inspiration or not. And
your journalism parts, which we'll come to soon, it is threaded throughout the columns. Like, rather than just giving your opinion or your viewpoint on a matter, you'll occasionally pick up the phone and call someone and quote them in a story. Yeah. So it's kind of, I like how it blends being a columnist with your history as a journalist as well.
Yeah, I actually wish, the strongest columns I write have more of that, and I guess that comes from, that was where my beginnings are, because there's a lot of opinion out there now, you know. I always think, I heard a wonderful term that the professionally outraged, that's who columnists are now, and I just think that's exactly right. Do you sit down and go, what am I outraged about today, you know?
There's some kind of tool nearby that's making terrible noises.
There is.
Which we'll...
There is. Can I close some doors? That'll help. Close doors?
I wouldn't worry about it. We'll soldier on. I can hear it in my headphones and it's not too bad.
Okay.
Apologies in advance to listeners. Hopefully it ends soon. So with not having a backlog, some weeks rather, do you find yourself running around the house madly, like looking for ideas under cushions, and when you're really stuck, like what are your go-to themes or topics?
Look, my daughters would say, when I'm being really cranky, or I'm doing something ridiculous, like, you know, pulling out a cupboard or pulling out a bookcase and doing something that has nothing to do with my column, they'll say, have you got a deadline you're avoiding? And I'll say, yeah, I have, you know. I know now that if, you know, you go for a run, you know, you try and get out of your head, you go for a run, you do something like that. Or I tend to I'll read poetry, you know, I'll go through and I'll go, okay, how do I do this again? Good words, you want good words, go and look for some good words and go and read, you know, and, okay, yes, these are good words, I know how to write some good words. You know, and it's funny, I think you need to jolt something creative in your head, because really, I'm not just writing a straight news piece, and I tend not to write, there's some columnists who are inflammatory. you know, if everyone's saying black, they'll say white, and then, you know, you get 300 comments on the website. So that's, you know, and that's fantastic. That's their gig. That's what they do. But I like, it's nice if it comes from a creative space or from, you know, or you're moved by something.
Yes.
You know, you're moved by something. That's nice.
You mentioned the professionally outraged earlier, which is funny, and that's totally not you or your column, because I find that your column is often, if not always, coming from a positive direction, like trying to shine a light on good things, interesting things, great art. You're viewing the world through a positive lens rather than here's the latest political scandal to get pissed off at, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
As a reader.
I think I've become a little bit more like that. I think when I started, I was a bit more, you know, oh my God, that's just ridiculous. You know, just can't believe that's happened. But I think I've become a little bit more optimistic. I think, and also I look at the paper and I think, okay, well, what's not in the paper? What's not, because my column I've got to write about 10 days ahead. And that not used to be the case. I used to write in a section that didn't get pre-printed, so I could write virtually only, you know, 2 days I could file the column and 2 days it would appear, and that meant it could be timely. I could write on an...
Basil the dog is attacking my hands playfully.
And
so when did that shift from...
It could be newsworthy? Over the years. So it's been about, I've been writing this year about 13 years, which I would never have imagined.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but so I was asked by Brian Crisp, and I said, oh, look, I'll do it for 10 weeks because really no one's got anything interesting to say after 10 weeks. I just thought no one could possibly write anything after 10 weeks. But, yeah, and so the deadline was quite sharp, so you could write on things that were newsworthy, you know, that were in the news that day. But now you can't, because that will be overtaken by the news in those 10 days. Right. So you've got to be really aware of that. So I tend to think, oh, okay, well, what's not in the paper? Yeah. Or what's... Because surely everyone can't be thinking the same thing. Surely everyone can't be thinking, you know... Yeah, just, yeah, everyone's, I like it if there's a different point of view in there, yeah. And even if I don't agree with it when I read someone's column, even if I don't agree with it, if it's a different point of view and it's well put, I'll think, oh, that's shifted the way I think a little bit.
It's being a star.
What?
He's acting out.
Why is my dog being so badly behaved?
Yeah. Come here, Basil.
Baz. Come here, Baz. I'll give him something and he'll run away and leave.
We'll take a short intermission. All right, we're back.
Okay.
So, yeah, that point of difference. Again, another thing I like about your column is how different it is to any other opinion columnist in Australia that I read. Like, you can flick through various newspapers and see the same kind of thought process going through the heads of the writers, but yours kind of exists outside of the regular style of thinking, I guess, which, again, is one reason why I really value it. And there's no question there. That's another compliment to you. So I'll ask you. I'm intrigued. At the end of your column, your email address is listed. What kind of emails do you tend to get?
Well, look, I get really lovely emails. I've got lovely readers, and that sounds so sappy, but I do. I guess because I don't go out there to just annoy a certain group of people. You know, you get occasional ones that, and I don't mind if I get an email that say I completely disagree with you and but I do read you. I think that's fair comment, and if someone puts their name to something, I've got a whole stack that I've got to reply to at the moment, but if someone puts their name on something, I'll always reply. I will never engage or reply to anything anonymous. And I don't even look at comments under stories or comments under your column. I think that is a really pointless, damaging, toxic, you know, just don't even go there. Just don't go there and you'll have a much happier life. But if someone writes to me and it's not abusive, I'm more than happy to engage. And in fact, I just get, people send you book recommendations and music recommendations because they go, oh wow, you put me onto this, so I'd like to return the compliment, you might enjoy that. And so you end up with just this gorgeous network of people that are all over the place. And that was actually a surprise when I started to write a column. Because up till then, if you're a news reporter, the only time you ever hear from, any feedback you get at all when I was news reporting, this is sort of before sort of social media, was you either got sued or there was a phone call to the editor or a phone call to you to tell you how much you'd, stuffed up the story. And that was it. You really didn't get too much positive feedback at all.
So do you enjoy that direct communication with your readers? If they're being nice and not assholes?
To start with, though, it was really... That's just going to be out of control, isn't it? Wow.
I seem to have come at the correct time for every loud noise in the neighbourhood. So.
How about I put down these two?
All right.
And we'll see if that minimises. I'll put the quietest for today.
Yeah. So Monday morning, would that be the kind of time you generally have a flick through the inbox and see what's come in after the Saturday column?
Yeah. I don't look at feedback while I'm still writing another column.
Why?
I don't know. I just... I haven't looked at the stuff from, Customs House and that sort of stuff, or if I wrote something on that Adani mine, because I knew there's going to be negative stuff there as well, or, someone just having a big go at you, and I think, okay, I don't know, I just need to be in a different headspace when I sit down to write something fresh. That when I wrote about my greyhound dying, which was, it was an indulgence. And I thought, but also it was a bit of an exercise in, can you do this without being too sentimental? So it's a bit of and I swear to God, I haven't even got to the bottom of the inbox of emails. Every mad dog lover in Queensland has written, and they've all written these beautiful emails with these stories about, people are so attached. I think people can talk and write about grieving over an animal in the way they can't about grieving over a human being.
I think you're right. Why do you think that is?
I think because loving human beings is complex. If it's a father or a mother, well, there's guilt and there's everything else. There's a lot of unresolved things involved there. Whereas with a pet, it's just complete. It's just pure sort of love. And I'll walk into a cafe or walking in someone and they'll just go, "You lost your dog," and they'll have tears in their eyes because they're projecting their sort of relationship with their dog, and I'm thinking, oh my God, we are, that was ridiculous, the amount of emails I got after that. And I haven't really read them all because some of them they were very they were really sad. So
would you say that's one of the biggest responses you've had to a column over the years?
It has been recently. I think I wrote about Mary, a GP who, a while ago, who was sort of talking about living and dying. There was a lot there. It's strange. You never know what people are going to respond to. You actually never know. And if you start trying to second guess and thinking, I'll write this because people will, that's just a fool's errand, because you got to write what you want to write. Yeah, what moves you. You can't actually even try and think about what other people would like to read. And sometimes it's not what they like to read. Like my father said to me, "Why the hell would you write about Adani mine, up at and he said, "Why would you write about that? It's going to go ahead. You'll be on the side of the losers." And I said, "Dad, is that the point? Do you only write about things if you're going to be on the side of the winners? That's not our job. But sometimes you might look like you might end up being on the side that doesn't win, have success.
But that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's important."
You mentioned the column about your dog, which I've brought with me because it was beautiful. When did you decide that you would write about that? About Dory?
Yeah, about doors. I don't know. I think pretty quickly after it happened, and I thought, and as I said, I thought, oh no, this, yeah, columnists do write about their pets. It can be a bit of a problem sometimes, and I
Speaking from experience here.
No, it was just, I remember, wasn't there a female columnist who wrote about her cats? Remember, and then was it Mark Latham had a go at all those old female columnists writing about their pussies? Wasn't that a
No,
thing
I
that
don't
happened
remember
a couple
that.
of years ago?
I remember Richard Glover last year wrote about his dog who had died.
Oh, did he?
Another beautifully written tribute.
Yeah, I like Richard Glover. Yeah, I like his stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I just started to write. Actually, I just started to write because I don't know why. I sometimes I think if you're a writer, you actually don't know what you're thinking or feeling until you've actually start to write. And then you think, oh, okay, yeah, that's how I feel. And then I thought, okay, well, this might be a bit of an exercise in, can I do this without it being too schmaltzy? And then I remember a long time ago reading an obituary that E.B. White wrote about a dog, and he had that lovely touch of being, it was sort of a whimsical, and it was just a lovely touch, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, so that's, sometimes you got to find the tone or the voice but when you're writing a piece. I mean, you'd know that once you get that sort of feel for it, you go, okay, I now know how to write this. Yeah. And yeah, so, and then I wrote it then, and actually I felt a lot better after I wrote it. The minute I finished it and I was happy with it, I actually I felt immediately better.
It's interesting reading it again just before I came here. It's written almost like a obituary you'd read in a newspaper. Like, it's not first person perspective, it's all about the dog and the family, and there's no I or my or me in it. Is that just how it came to you, or did you decide to take yourself out of it at some point?
No, I think I did. I think I started to write it one way, and then I stopped and thought, well, this is all about God, I feel awful. And then I actually did go and look. I wrote an obituary last year, or might have been last year, and it was an obituary for, I thought, I just wanted to get an idea of how was that structure I did for that obituary, and I know I wrote this obituary really carefully, and it was of Clary Manning. And Clary Manning had been a big newspaper man up in North Queensland, and he had been the editor of the Mackay Daily Mercury before I worked there. And everyone was always going, oh, Clary Manning was, the bee's knees in newspaper man. And so the Courier-Mail, when he died, asked me to write his obituary, which I remember thinking, oh man, I've got to get every word of this right. You can never stuff up a newspaper man's obituary. And so I was really careful writing his obituary, and you write it in that sort of tone, which is very, I actually like obituaries. I like reading a really well written obituary. I think they're great. I hate ones that everyone's a great, he's a beautiful family man, and all that, when you know the person involved, and you think, what? No, they're not. So I love it when it reflects the person. And when you're a cadet on a regional paper, often you've got to write a lot of obituaries, and you go to a lot of funerals, and you're standing in the church, and sometimes you really want the obituary to match your person. So I actually went back and read the Clary Manning obituary, and then thought, okay, that's how I want to write. So
is he the one who died at 78 after a night on the piss and smoking a cigar and going to bed and never waking up? Is that the person I'm thinking of?
No.
That's a different person.
Yeah, it was a different one. Yeah, he was. He was a good deal older. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. You even address your concern around not wanting to come across too strongly in the column about Dory. You wrote, "Readers, forgive me the dual writing crimes of sentimentality and anthropomorphism." I like that line. You think it's gauche to be writing sentimentally about in this column, in this space?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I used to I've read sort of criticisms of different writers or whatever. They say, oh, that was very sentimental. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't realise being sentimental was such a terrible thing. You know what I mean? So I don't see it as such a terrible thing. But I didn't even think, like, in my family, we're all we all sort of tend to come from the land. We're farmers. We all had dogs growing up. We've all still got dogs now, and we all talk about our dogs as if our dogs, talk and what they think, and they look at you when you're being an idiot and think, what the hell, we all do that sort of thing. So, and it wasn't until one new boyfriend in the family said, oh God, your family, does that a lot with your animals. That's ridiculous. Animals are animals. And we just all turned on him, what? So, I know other people think that those two things are crimes, but to me, they're a part of life.
Did you show this to your daughters before publication?
I showed it to Pip, who was the one who was in there when she was put down. And I showed it to her, and actually, she had a tear, and she was most pleased. I think she was pleased that she got a little sort of sideways mention, because she was there and she wants to be a vet, and so she was there for the process of putting her down. And whenever I do mention the girls, early on, probably the first half of writing columns, I didn't mention. I would never mention my daughters or my family or. We just didn't. That was something I safeguarded.
Drawing a line between private and professional.
Oh, yeah, I was really... And then, so that was for about the first half of doing it. And in fact, I've got a heap of sisters up in North Queensland, and when I took the gig, they just went, you are never to write about us. Or we were a very secret squirrel family. We're all quite secret, quite quiet, And so I don't write much about the girls, but I've actually done that more in recent years. But I will ask them, or I will show them beforehand. Because that's kind of it's having a writer in your family. If you're not the writer, is this. It's I don't know how other members of the family feel about that, because it's your version of events.
And it's going down on paper or on the web, and it may probably will long outlast
your
anyone.
Version of history.
That's right.
Yeah, the writer writes the history.
That's right. They have the final word. No matter what happens in the room, in the situation, they can go back at their computer and knock it out.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a lot of power.
It is, and that can cause resentments, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Oh, last thing. When do you see the illustrations that go with these columns? Do you get to see them beforehand? Is that kind of...
No, I don't. And in fact, this is going to sound terrible, but I don't even read. I don't read my work once it's in the paper. I actually get in really...
I understand.
I'm awkward. Do you like that? Are you funny about it?
Once I've read the page proofs before going to print, I know what it's going to be like. I don't need to read it in the actual hard
That's
copy.
A nice illustration, yeah. That's a lovely illustration, yeah. Yeah, at one stage when at the columns they were using photographs and stuff, and some of them were, I was like, I didn't think they quite matched. So anyway, instead of getting all precious and head up about that, I just don't. Once it's gone, and they do with it what they will, I guess.
So 13 years now.
Yeah.
How many editors have you had during that time?
I was employed by Greg Chamberlain, actually. So, Greg, Des Houghton with a perm, not David Fagan, Chris Mitchell, David Fagan, Plucher, who came between, and Chris Dorr, and now we've got, so that's 8, I think, 8. Have I missed someone? I don't know.
And you file directly to the editor of the Courier-Mail, not the Canvas editor?
Yes, no, I just filed to the Canvas editor.
Oh, right, yeah, gotcha.
So for about until the last couple of years, I was in the office, and I wrote in the office as well as home. But for the last couple of years, I just file my column now. And so the last couple of editors, I wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was at a function last year, speaking at the function, and the organiser said, "Oh, that's great, Kath, I've got you sitting next to your editor, and that'll be good, and there's some other..." And I said, "Oh, that'll be good, because it'll give me a chance to introduce myself to him." And they were quite gobsmacked by that, but that's...
So what's that editorial relationship like
journalism.
then? Do you? Yeah, I also have not met several of my editors. That's kind of how it is as a freelance. But so you file a column. Like, is there discussion? Is there like
No.
kickback?
No.
It's always as you send it in. Almost always.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's been interesting because I actually that's when I go and speak at anything, I'm often asked about, okay, well, you work for a Murdoch newspaper, and so do you get told what to write, or do you get told not what to write, and things get changed, all the rest of it, and no. So
People are surprised at that kind of autonomy.
yeah, they are. Yeah, and I have to say, yeah, they are surprised. So yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, the thinking behind that. You can guess what the thinking is behind that. You know what I mean? I mean, if you're writing something which is not, it sort of seems to be in line with the sort of editorial line. Newspapers do that because they want to be able to say, "Oh, look, we're very fair. We have both sides of the story," or yeah.
Just finishing up on the column, because we'll talk about other things soon. You might be getting a bit bored of this line of questioning, but so do you have a weekly routine? Like, what's your weekly must-meet deadline, and how often do you file ahead of that?
I'm supposed to file on Friday afternoons, and I've got a very lovely news editor, and sometimes I don't always file on Friday afternoons, so. But that would be the ideal, and it actually makes life a lot easier if you just file on deadline, because then you don't have angst hanging over you and you beat yourself up for the next 2 days before you file again.
Yeah.
So it's just stupid. I don't know why I don't understand human beings and procrastination, and yet I still haven't learned. Don't you think I would learn? Yeah. But yeah. But throughout that time. I guess when you've got a family, you just allow, you allow that to interfere. Yeah.
Are you proud of this column, Kathleen?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. You can always do better. You always think, okay, next time I'll do better. Yeah, or even just sometimes you're proud of a line in it or a sentence, and then you think, okay, you can do better next time.
So 13 years, you've done roughly, 600 plus columns, which is what, 600 times 1,000? 600,000 words?
That's a lot.
Isn't that astonishing to think?
Wow, okay, yeah. Yep. And really, you should make them count, shouldn't you? Yeah.
Has anyone approached you to anthologise them in any way, or collections of them?
I get asked a lot by readers. Yeah.
I think it would do well.
And that used to be a big thing. There used to be, but I don't know if it is so much anymore. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think a lot of them are timeless in the sense that they're not tied to certain events that are happening in Brisbane or in Queensland. So, if I was a publisher, I would commission you to put together a collection of your finest columns.
And there's so much money in books, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
That's right. I'll open this window now. It's gone quiet.
Okay.
I know. How come we've gone from a profession that there was so much money in, and now not so much?
I don't know. I mean, has it always been thus? I'm obviously coming in as a young person at the tail end of a perhaps wounded industry, if not dying. But you've known many authors during your time, I suppose. Have you noticed how they're talking about money and writing and all that sort of thing?
I think they now making their money, in book sales with events. It's like musos with gigs. You don't make your money with your by selling your music. You're actually making your money by your live performances.
The product is an advertisement for the experience.
Yeah, and then that person becomes. You'll see with a lot of authors, then they're on panels and they're talking heads, and that seems to then tend to become the career almost. For a lot of writers, definitely.
You do regular author events yourself, book launches and that sort of thing, or semi-regular throughout the year?
Yeah. I've got a couple of friends own different bookshops in Brisbane, and yeah, they're fantastic, and they support, you know, so many wonderful local causes, and they support Australian authors, and yeah, I'll go and definitely do events for them, yeah, with different authors.
Fiona Steger,
Yeah,
by chance?
yeah.
Previous Penmanship guest.
Hey?
Had her on last year.
Oh, did you? I haven't read her. I haven't listened to her, so I have to do that. Yeah, she's great.
She is. And it's such a skill, like interviewing an author at a book launch. Like I had John Birmingham interviewed me at my Talking Smack book launch in 2014, which was great. And he's obviously an old hand at it.
Yep.
He kind of knows what the people want. But
Yep.
how do you go about structuring questions, or do you structure questions for those kind of events?
Yeah, I do. I do, and sometimes I think it would probably be a better talk if I didn't actually. But I tend to jump I'm someone who normally would jump all over the place with wherever the thought takes me, and I guess that's the way I write as well. But I sort of then have to rein myself in and go, okay, well, if the talk's 1 hour, it needs to have, you need to actually break it up, and it needs to have some structure. And yeah, 1 hour it goes very, very quickly. I mean, I did Yasmin Abdel Magid about a week or two ago, and she's wonderful. She's really got a lot to say, and yeah. So you want to ask them questions about the key things that people are curious about, but also you want to ask a couple of questions about things that maybe they haven't been asked about before, because you're looking for that. You're looking for that moment when they pause and they have to think about the answer.
They don't have a pre-prepared answer if they've done lots of events,
Yeah.
which is often the case. Like
Yeah.
I found that myself. Like you get on that promo circuit, you get asked the same question, so you develop pat responses.
Yeah.
So to break through that.
Yeah, that's right. And you'll notice the really sort of people who've been interviewed so many times. The ones who do it really well are the ones who actually give you an answer which you think is fresh, and they've just thought of it, and you've really dug something up, and you actually know that it's a story or a memory or whatever that they've talked about before, but they make it feel fresh for you.
They make it a performance.
That's
and
right.
Put themselves into it. We are
That's
sitting.
right. And they're storytellers, They're
Absolutely.
storytellers, yeah.
And storytelling is obviously very important to you
Yeah.
because you've made a career out of it and you absorb it in your spare time.
Mm.
From what I gather.
Mm.
We are sitting in your office. We're facing your desk. You've got a few things posted on the wall. Can you talk me through them?
Oh, right. Oh, geez, these are just... What are they? They're some of my daughter's stuff, actually, from when they were tiny. They're now 20 and 17, so I don't know why we've still got those. A photo of my father disappearing down to the chook yard. He's a farmer, cattle and sugarcane, and that's just a classic Arthur moment, really. You know what I mean? Like, you know how when you all get together in photos and you're all in your fancy clothes and everyone's sort of looking shiny, but that's not really your family, you know what I mean? Whereas my father heading down the chook yard to check on something in his old work clothes, that is classically my father. I don't know what else.
There's a couple of quotes there.
There is. That just made me laugh. I think it's a Tom Stoppard quote: "Eternity is a terrible thought." I mean, where's it going to end? Which for someone raised a Catholic, that's yeah.
And there's another one which is slightly obscured, which I'll read out.
Oh yeah, what's that one?
Andrew here, recording this in post-production as we walked away from the microphone for a moment. The quote on Kathleen's wall that we're looking at reads, "Journalists, like teachers, are society's narrators. The good ones discern our fears, anxieties and curiosities and tell stories that make life meaningful and manageable." That's by Max Frankel in the New York Times in 1997. Okay, back to the conversation.
Yeah. You know when you I know when you're feeling like crap, or even when just things are feeling very ordinary, and you read. I find it particularly amazing if I'm reading an author, and it might be from 20 or 50 or 100 years ago, and they describe where you're at, and I just think that's a piece of magic. Like,
It's like time travelling.
Yeah, and human beings are the same. Yeah.
Do those quotes help you at all when you're writing, or they just Because I've done the same thing, posting quotes on my wall, and sometimes I look at them, sometimes I don't.
Sometimes I think so, because when you're a columnist, you're sort of neither a news reporter or you're in that funny middle ground. I mean, I love essayists. I love the idea of the essay, and sometimes I think in terms of I sort of set myself the task of can you write an essay in this sort of style or with this sort of tone, rather than, because otherwise I think it's just going to sound the same all the time. And certainly I didn't go to university, so I always think writing 1,000 words each week for me is like practicing essay writing. So I think, can I play around with it this way or that way, or will this work or that won't work, in the same way that I guess a lecturer would set you different give you a reading list and set you different tasks.
Is that kind of keeping it interesting for yourself as well?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, definitely. So I love short stories, and I love essays, and I love going back and reading essays from from years and years ago that people have written, because some of them, there's just some of them are brilliant, and they teach you everything you need to know about saying something powerful in a very, very short amount of time and words. It's very humbling and very embarrassing, really. And I'd like to think they worked on it for a very long time. But, yeah.
What are your reading habits each week? I noticed a few newspapers lying around.
I read any newspapers I can get my hands on. So I read just all the papers each day.
Each day?
The Courier in the morning, and then when I go out early for coffee and I read the Australian. And then when I come home, I read the Sydney Morning Herald online, and I'll read the Guardian online, and then I like the Weekly Guardian, the Saturday paper. I think if you try and read widely, then you're getting some sort of idea of what the real truth is, and then everything else I like, whether, I think the New Yorker's really, I read that. What else? There's a lovely publication called The Sun magazine, which comes out monthly. It's American. I think it's really one of the only publications that hasn't got ads in it, and it's got beautiful creative writing in it. The Queensland Country Life, rural papers, because my folks come from the land.
Wow.
And I often find regional Australia is more different from capital city Australia. I think they're more different than, say, sort of American capital cities and Australian capital cities, if you know what I mean. I think there's a bigger divide, and I think when we see elections and we're surprised by outcomes in certain seats and certain electorates. I think sitting in inner city Brisbane, you were surprised by that, but I think there's a big gap, there's a big gulf between regional Australia and the capital cities.
Do you see your column sometimes as being a conduit between those two worlds because of your background? Yeah,
I'd probably, if the more I do it, the better, the more I like it. Yeah. Because I know that often if I got feedback from, if I hear soon, he lets me know if he disagrees, and he probably disagrees often. So I think our newspaper should reflect Queensland rather than Brisbane.
So you read the news a lot each day. Are you looking for anything in particular?
Yeah, something interesting.
How often do you find that?
It's a real trap, isn't it? Because you would know as well, when you're flicking around online, there's a lot to read. It's like fast food. It's like Chinese takeaway. You're eating, and then you're just still not satisfied. you know, and I like the long reads. I like, you know, particular reporters or writers or columnists, so I'll go particularly looking for their stuff.
Any you want to mention? Any Australians that you particularly fond of?
You know, if it's politics and columns, I really loved Annabelle Crabb. I think she had how clever to be able to make politics interesting and funny. God, you know.
Yes.
She's terrific. I will. In the Australian, I used to read Nikki Sava because she was an insider. I read Brad Richardson because he was an insider. You know where they're coming from, but yeah, you know what their background and where they're coming from is. But that doesn't mean that devalues what they write. Sometimes there's some really interesting stuff. Even columnists I don't agree with, I'll read anyway, because I think sometimes they can just shift you a couple of degrees one way or the other, and I think that's really healthy. I'd read anything that Hedley's written, because I know he's just a dog with a bone.
Hedley Thomas, former Penmanship guest.
Yes, yep, and so he's
dog with a bone. That's exactly right.
Yeah, so I always say, you know, if you're slightly shonky in Australia, either a politician or whoever, and you get a phone call and they say, it's Hedley Thomas here, I want to ask a few questions. So I'd put the phone down and just fucking get on the next plane and go. Because if you've got anything dodgy in your background, it's just, so I really admire investigative journalists because it's enormously hard work. It is just hard now. And it's expensive journalism, and I don't know who's going to pay for it. And sometimes it is utterly unrewarding in that even sometimes your own publication or your own organisation gets a bit sick of you because you actually have to be obsessed.
Which Chris Masters spoke about in my interview with him, for sure.
It can break you.
And he also had litigation and defamation lawsuits and all that sort of stuff.
And your peers get sick of you because you're obsessed. You tend to be obsessed with one thing, and whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. But with an investigative journalist, you know, and your peers get sick of you because you're always pushing because you think your story should be on the front page, or it's not getting the best run it should get, or you just need one more week or one more month or whatever it is. And so your peers are sick of you. If your organisation's not making you feel loved, you're bashing your head up against a brick wall trying to get the story up. There might be threats against your family. Your family's so sick of it. It's just the hardest gig. And when you read those stories, you think, okay, I can only guess at the amount of days and nights and interviews and phone calls and court cases. You can actually see it there all on the page. And I've got a lot of admiration for them.
Out of interest, did you see Spotlight, the film?
No, but I'm looking forward to going.
Highly recommend. You'll love it, for sure.
Oh, that's you've got to ask yourself really, and what was happening in Australia with its journalists, because I know a number of journalists who were at those various schools. You know, the great unspoken. Yeah.
You grew up in North Queensland. You've got siblings. Where do you sit in the family?
I'm the youngest.
You're the youngest?
Yeah. So we've got six in the family, a good Catholic family. My brother, who's the oldest, and then 5 girls. And I thought my father was really, really lucky. He's got a cane farmer and cattleman. And then one of my boyfriends said to me, your poor dad, every time one of your sisters was born, he would have been hoping for a son. And I actually didn't even realise that. I was like, no. But he's very well taken care of now by all his daughters. So I was the youngest, which is great. Being the youngest in the family is just fantastic because you fly under the radar.
They've seen it all before.
Yeah, you're not overparented.
Yeah.
There's no helicopter parenting. So, your parents are never up at the school, having interviews with teachers and telling them whatever. I think you're a bit of an observer.
Which is a fine trait to have for a journalist.
Yeah. You're just watching your family, and when big families are really amusing, and so you're watching them, and everyone always takes a role in a family. How many are you in your family?
I'm the youngest of two.
Okay.
Older brother.
So someone will always take a role. So what did your brother? What's his role? Is he sort of good and worthy and responsible?
I'd say more so than me.
Okay, so he took that role, so you had to find another role.
Yeah, I guess.
And we do that, and so I was the youngest in my family, and it's great. I'm very, very grateful for being spoiled.
When did your love for language emerge?
My dinner time was everyone sitting around the table and talking or debating or whatever, whatever was going on, discussion. My father is a sort of a storyteller, and you love to listen to when he's telling you something that's going on or happening.
Yeah.
And my grandmother, his mother was like that as well. So any occasions we got together, there was food and good wine, and all the kids were all at the table, were all expected to have an opinion, and there were words in the air. I've forgotten what this is like, but I remember talking to Michael Madigan, who's also a journalist from up that way. And when you're in small towns, country towns, your father would say, did you see Bill Riley down the road? And I'd say, no. Oh, yeah. And he'd say, was he with Jan so-and-so? And I said, well, who's that? He'll say, the third sister of the De Grara family with the gimpy leg, who married the man with one arm that came from... Yeah, he would have all these descriptions, and he knew everybody, because he's lived in that area for all his life. All the Italian and Maltese families, they're big families, so everyone's connected. And he just couldn't understand why you wouldn't be curious. And I guess he always sort of had this little descriptions of people that would make you think, oh, yeah, that was right, he's got a gimpy leg. So, yeah.
Were you a good student?
I don't know. I don't think I tried very hard. I liked English. And I got into trouble a bit. But yes.
For what?
Oh, just being a kid, I think it might be youngest in the family, but authority, I don't see laws and rules that apply. I don't think they apply to me. And I'm not even proud of that. It's just ridiculous. And even now I park and I don't put money in meters. I don't see, I just don't, I don't think rules apply to you. And I think I saw growing up authority figures, whether it be, I went to a Catholic school where there were nuns and priests, and I remember just thinking, it's all a bit, I just, you get beaten up by the nuns for teaching you piano. And I remember just being resentful and thinking, and so, yeah, so so I was a bit like that, but nothing too terrible. And we all were sent off to boarding school. I have no idea why. I can only guess my older sister was seen as wayward or something. Anyway, we all were sent off to boarding school for 11 and 12 down in Yeppoon.
All right.
Which was funny because Yeppoon at that stage was like it was like the drug capital of Queensland. It was just a funny place to have an all-girls Catholic boarding school. But I had great fun there. There was sport, and it was lots of girls from a lot of properties, from out west. And it was just, there's not too much parental supervision. I often am amazed when I think back at that school period. Every bit of work we did was our own work, because there wasn't anyone to help you, and there wasn't any internet. I remember loving the library. I remember loving the newspapers in the library. But we were very much in a cocoon at that school, and it was a time when Iwasaki was trying to build a resort in Yeppoon,
Not familiar with this.
So Joe Bjelke-Petersen, who was anti-giving the Japanese buying our coastline, blah, blah, blah. For some reason, Iwasaki, the Japanese businessman, was allowed to buy Queensland coastline in Yeppoon, build a big resort. It was blown up at the stage. A bomber tried to blow it up because he was anti-Joe Bjelke-Petersen. And so all this big controversy was going on while we were at the school in Yeppoon. And we had, the school started Japanese classes. And Mr. Iwasaki would come and visit the Japanese classes, and he would come and give out pearls, right? And I didn't do Japanese classes, so I remember thinking, oh, this is such bullshit, But I remember thinking, and so, I grew up in the electorate of Mackay was a little National Party electorate, very strong National Party. And it was sort of Jeff Muntz who ended up, leaving politics under a cloud. And I remember at boarding school, I remember reading, Philip Adams was writing his column in The Australian, in the actual newspaper at that stage, not the magazine. And I remember reading him, and I hadn't read anything like that before in my life. It was just different, and it was fresh, and it was so different to what everyone else around me was saying, because it was, it was conservative. Deeply conservative.
Yeah. How did you develop career aspirations? Like, what was the path after high school?
After high school, I remember saying to a career or a teacher at school, boarding school, I think I want to be a journalist. I don't know why I said that, and she said, don't be ridiculous, there are no jobs, so don't forget about that. Anyway, I thought, okay, so I came back to Mackay, and it was the first day of the holiday, so I came downstairs on the farmhouse, on the farm, and I was thinking, oh, well, this is fantastic, I've got these long holidays, and then I'll look for a job in January. And I sat down at the table for breakfast, and my father said, so, what job are you applying for today? And I remember thinking, what?
No messing around.
No messing around. So I was all lined up to be a nurse. I had got through, for some reason, I don't know why, my sister was a nurse. I would have been a terrible nurse, but these poor patients. So I was all lined up, and I even had been measured for a uniform to be a nurse. And then I saw a job in a paper which was just, must have been like a receptionist at the local council, and I thought, no, I'll go and do that. I can type or whatever, I'll go and do that. So I went and did that for a year, and in that year I think I just went to I just badgered the local newspaper and said, I want to come and work here.
In person?
Yeah, I went, took a letter, I said I want to go work, and I just go around and said, well, can I hang around and just get an idea of what it's like to see if it's what I want to do.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was, and they did cadetships in those days, as all the papers did, and so I did about a year being working in the reception of Mackay City Council, which was great training because everyone who came in was really cranky and pissed off. So it was like rates and rats and drains and potholes, and they're all really cranky.
No one's going there for a good reason, or because they want to thank someone.
That's right. So I was on the phone, and I was also had a counter that people would come to, and I was like, all of 18, so I was like, what? And that was great. They were just all cranky. And another weird part of my job was I had to give out the rat sack. So for free, people come and get rat sack. And I used to have to wrap it in newspaper and hand it over the counter. And I used to also have to type up reports from the heads of department. And I do remember, they'd be about 8 pages, and I'd think, oh really, I could make this more succinct. So I used to just type up 4 pages of, and they didn't particularly like that. But I wasn't terribly suited to that job. But it actually did give me when I was working at the paper, I was a city council reporter, and it actually gave me, I understood the workings of it. Yeah.
Wow.
And I also understood that if you're writing something, and you walk down the street and you see the people who you write about, and so you better get it right.
What year was that first year that you worked in the newspaper?
That would have been. Bishop 82 must have been the end of 83, I think. Yeah.
And what was the newspaper?
It was the Mackay Daily Mercury.
Mm-hmm. So one of the editors or management must have seen something in you to give you a chance, do you think? Or would they let anyone off the street do what you were doing?
I don't know. Rod Manning was the editor at the time, and he was very, as all probably good editors should be, very, very pedantic about getting things right in the paper. He was a big historian. He was a very serious man. Mick Rosa was the chief of staff. I don't know where Mick ended up, but he was good fun. Yeah, he took me under his wing. Paddy Hill. I'm just trying to think who was a sport reporter, but it was I was just lucky, and it was a great crew, and it was exactly how you'd want a newsroom to be, which was there were some reporters who were still typing on typewriters with paper, and then computers had just really come in. So there was still newspaper everywhere, and everyone smoked, and that everyone went at dinner time to the pub next door and drank. Quite, when I think about it, and when you think about it now, quite large amounts, and still came back and put out the newspaper with remarkably few errors. So they were pretty good.
You fell in with your people, it seems.
Hey?
You fell in with...
Yeah, and I just liked not being... I don't think I'd be very good in a regular office. I like a robust workplace. Yeah.
So that first year, were they giving you the jobs that no one else wanted to do, or you're a city council reporter, you said? Was that an esteemed job, or was it kind of like the lower end of the totem pole?
No, I can't remember what you were given, but I know I did my cadetship very quickly. I guess I knew a lot of people in the Mackay area, and I guess, I knew a lot of people and a lot of stuff simply because my father, you did. You know what I mean? So, and I like to have a go at anything. So they would just, as soon as they could see that you had any get up and go and writing ability, because regional newsrooms, everyone's got to be able to do everything very, very quickly. So the minute you showed you were any good at something, you would just be, you can get in the truck now and drive out to Morini Shire Council and cover that council meeting. I have no idea what I was doing half the time, but you just went and did the best job you could. So that it was actually, cadetships are fantastic. That even though I didn't get I don't think I got any actual training in, sitting down, this is how to be a journalist. I got to watch other people be journalists, and you just get thrown in the deep end, and you do cope. And it was funny because I did shorthand at school and decided that was just for secretaries, and I really wasn't going to learn shorthand, so I actually just spent that whole year looking out the window and promptly failed.
They taught shorthand in school back then? That's amazing.
To girls.
Wow.
Typing in shorthand.
Wow.
And I completely wasted that opportunity.
Yeah.
And didn't like the teacher, and then got to the newspaper, and of course you needed to have 110 words a minute, and they brought in a shorthand teacher for their cadets, and within a year we got 110. It was because it was a means to an end, and you didn't have all the portable recorders you have, and I have to say shorthand helps a lot in it's a time saver. So you can look through your notes very quickly. When you've got a tape, you're going forward, back. Yeah. So I know. I remember saying to my mother, shorthand's such a waste of time. I never do shorthand, but secretaries do. But meanwhile, it was the only skill I really needed to be a journalist. So.
Any memorable experiences or failures in those first few years that really stuck out in your mind as learning experiences?
Actually, yeah. There was. I did a piece on the Cane Groves Association very early on. It was in my first year. I got a tip-off from someone in the cane industry. The Cane Groves Association had done this deal with a big fertiliser company, and it ended up failing, and it ended up being a big sort of rort and a waste of millions of dollars. And I wrote the story, okay, and I was sure of it, and I'd done all the background. And then we got threatened that we were going to get sued, and then I don't know how far that went, but I remember, I was a first year cadet, and I do remember feeling, I never got a reassuring chat with the editor. I never got No one made me feel reassured. It was simply, we're going to need your notebooks.
Mm.
Yeah. And I remember feeling quite left out to dry.
Yeah.
And that was terrifying, as a first year cadet. But it was funny because we didn't ever get sued. And a couple of months later, that story won an award for rural, regional journalism. And I got flown down to Brisbane. And I can't remember what the awards were at the time. I remember.
It wouldn't have been Clarions.
No, it was financial journalism, which is such a hoot because I'm so bad with finances, as are most journalists. And I remember thinking, well, that was the highs and lows of it. Like that, it's hard as a young journalist because everyone thinks you're a lot more confident than you are. You know what I mean? You would know that. You've got to project a certain confidence in everything you do. But, your work is held up to scrutiny all the time in ways that I don't think other people's work is. And, so that was a bit of a learning curve. I remember thinking, whoa, okay, no one is going to actually hold your hand. Yeah.
But they probably didn't have time, right? They had deadlines to meet, and the sub-editors had facts to check and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So if you can't do it, get out. Sort of thing.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But I do. I guess you sometimes felt as if you were not skating on thin ice, but your talent was. I never liked the feeling of your talent was spread thin. You know how you see a lot of people and they go for the next job and they go for the next job and they go for the next job, even if they haven't got the skills. I always think, I'd never like to be like that, but I don't like that feeling of ever feeling exposed or you haven't quite got something quite right. But yeah.
Did you find it easier to talk to people as a journalist?
Yeah, I think I did. I think most people like to talk about themselves, and if you ask them questions, they're happy to do that, even if it's a death knock.
Tell me about death knocks.
Death knocks are interesting, and they were a big surprise to me as a young journalist because I remember thinking, how could I be asked to do this? This is horrendous. And if I was the person on the other side of the door, I would be outraged and I would, slam the door in their face. But I think if you do it respectfully, often the person who's lost someone, it's the time they want to talk about the person they've lost. And if it's been in circumstances, if it's been a crash in a black spot intersection or something like that, then it's all about, I never want this to happen to anyone else. But it's remarkable how much people want to talk about the person they've lost. And I think this is going to sound awful, but as a reporter, you need to be one of the first people there. They're not going to be interested in talking to you if you're the fifth reporter on their doorstep. If you know what I mean? Because the other reporters who've been before might have been rude or disrespectful or pushy. So I think if you turn up and you're respectful and you tell them what you want to do, and you tell them how you want to do it, and most of the time, I'd have to say 100% of the time, they will come inside and make you a cup of tea and get out the photo album and,
100% of the time?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What were your first words in that situation?
Introduce yourself and I'm so sorry for your loss, And often I would say, have you ever been interviewed before, or have you had anything to do with the press before? I think that's a really valid question with most people that you interview. You say, have you? Because some people would have had a lot of experience and others will say no, and then you'll say, okay, well, I'll explain what will happen or how it might go. I think really in that moment you're just talking to another human being and you feel really sorry for them. But ultimately, as a young reporter, you've got some gnarly old sub-editor back at the paper saying, get the bloody quotes and try and get a photo. Yeah.
Would you? allow yourself to become emotional in that situation, if need be, or would you kind of keep that professional
No,
distance?
I don't know. I don't think so. No, I don't think I ever have.
Yep.
Yeah. Because that doesn't do them any good, I don't think. Yeah. Because the job you've got to do that will serve them best is to write the best story about the person who's dead. Yeah.
Would you hear from those people after the piece had run sometime?
Yeah, sometimes you will. And because, definitely. Because people feel, in that moment when they're really vulnerable, if anyone they've had some dealings with, whether it be a reporter or maybe a policeman, or someone at the hospital, whatever, if you tend to remember a kindness in those moments. So often you'll get a phone call to say thank you for that, or but I guess I was always aware I wasn't working in a big city. I was working in a small town, so it'll be your next door neighbour's cousin, sister that so you can't screw people over. In those situations, if they don't deserve it, yeah.
What was the progression from there as a cadet?
I was there until I came. So I became a graded journalist. So when you're at a regional paper, your shift might be 3 days reporting, whether it be court reporting or police reporting or general round or whatever, and you might do a night sub-editing on the front page. And I remember I used to do Friday night sport reporting, sport editing, which was just hilarious. But
Wow.
yeah,
Wow,
so and
hilarious.
layouts, yeah. So how good is that, really, when you think about it? Like you'd never get an opportunity to do that. And you get contacted by people who want to be, journalists at uni, and I always say, always consider going regional, whether it be radio or TV or whatever, newspapers, because you can make all your mistakes with no one really watching, and you'll get a go at everything, and that's just brilliant. Okay, you might stuff up, but you'll learn pretty quickly. Whereas if you're in a city newsroom, you could sit forever and never get a go at any of those things. I was pretty much just doing that. I was doing a sort of split of reporting and sub-editing, and I wanted to come down to Brisbane, and I applied, and I got an interview with Greg Chamberlain, and I got the job. And then he rang me back a couple of days later and said, I've got to renege on that because the tally had just closed.
All right.
And he said, we need to absorb those journalists first, which was a fair cop, I thought. And I thought, oh, bloody hell. And that was a bit of a bugger. But yeah, a couple of months later he rang and said, come and work for us.
Right.
And I came down as a sub-editor, and was a sub-editor for a while.
On the Courier-Mail?
On the Courier-Mail, yeah.
What year did you arrive?
88.
Mm-hmm.
Expo, and I was there for about a year before I went overseas.
As a reporter?
As I went overseas because my boyfriend at the time was a cricketer, and he was going over to play cricket. And I just thought, I wanted to go. It was in South Africa. I wanted to go to South Africa. It was the year de Klerk was elected. It was just before the elections, so I thought this is fantastic. And you couldn't, as a journalist, you couldn't get a visa to get in. You couldn't get a work visa to get in because there was restrictions, etc. And so through him and through the cricket, I got a visa. It turned up as we sat on the plane about to take off.
Gee.
Yeah, so it was. There were press restrictions in South Africa at the time, so you couldn't even fly directly into South Africa. You had to fly into Harare, and then and then the next day then you flew in from there. There were no direct flights into South Africa.
Wow.
That was the tail end of the boycotts.
Was he playing with Australian national team?
He did play for Australia, but he went to play for Kepler Vessels. It was a province, so it was the Eastern Province, which was like, Queensland Sheffield Shield. Right. It was like the Sheffield Shield over there.
Okay.
So he was towards the end of his career here. He played for Australia and then Queensland, and then towards the end of his career he went over to play with Kepler. And so that's how we ended up over there.
And you were reporting while there?
Yeah.
For whom?
Yeah, we were in Port Elizabeth, and there was two papers in Port Elizabeth. There was a broadsheet, which was seen as the white newspaper, and there was the tabloid, which was seen as the black afternoon newspaper. And that was called, it wasn't the PE Express, it was, it'll come to me. But yeah, so that was really wonderful, because it was just while press restrictions were on, and then they were just lifted after the election, after de Klerk was elected, and that was really interesting to sort of watch that transition. And to even watch how different news was reported for different segments of the population. Yeah. I mean, I remember being in sort of the Chief of Staff's office one day, and there was a tear gassing down the main street, and I was like, oh my God, okay, well, photographer, reporter will get down there and whatever, and they were like, no, it's Tuesday, it's tear gas. You had to not take your sensibilities to there and apply them. There was just everyday things that they didn't even blink at. Yeah, so that was a really, really interesting time. But it was a time when, a couple of years beforehand, the black townships, which sort of are all round and sort of service these white suburbs, which is how it works there with workers. A couple of years earlier, they had been in turmoil, and there had been rings of razor wire around them, and there had been fires, and no one went to school, and all the rest of it. There'd been a lot of action, and then that had really died off, and it had been a very quiet time, and led up to the election a very quiet time, after the election a very quiet time. And then the next year Mandela was released, so that whole period we were there, it was just this really hopeful time. And you felt very safe in the black townships.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how were you received as a white young Australian woman reporting?
Yeah, well, I don't think that was so much the issue as were the reaction of sort of wives and girlfriends of the cricketers, or who had never gone into the black townships themselves, had been born and bred in South Africa, or their workers in their house might all live in the nearby township, but they never really know what that's like, and they they were very like, it's very dangerous, and you're very naive and you're a little bit silly, and I may well have been very naive and a little bit silly, you know what I mean, but which is what you are when you're 23 years old. But I had nothing but really good experiences in there, and made good friends, and so grateful that reporting gave me that opportunity, because otherwise if I wasn't working and I wasn't reporting, I wouldn't have ended up being in those situations that I ended up being in, and getting that network of friends, and really seeing that side of South Africa, which is really South Africa, in its entirety. And it's tricky, because it's really easy for us in Australia to sit here and judge. But I remember staying in one apartment, and in the garage of that apartment were old signs that had been up, which were whites only and blacks only signs. Just almost just inconceivable that would be the case. But but there were huge peace marches going on in South Africa at the time, and to be able to go along on those, and there was they were massive, they're just a sea of black faces, and they did, for the majority of them, stay peaceful. And I often think, oh man, I wish I had the writing skills and reporting skills that you have when you're older to be able to apply back then. I often think that I could have written a lot better and I could have reported a lot better. But then you have, when you're that age, you have bravado, and energy and blind sort of confidence, and so I guess you make up for it in other ways.
How long did you stay?
2 years, 2 cricket seasons.
Yeah.
And then and sort of the second year Mandela was released, and that was to be there when that happened was extraordinary. That was just good luck. And we had been on safari, and in Okavango, and no news, had no news at all. And we came back into Johannesburg, and the driver driving us, whose name was Nelson, he was sort of mucking around singing in the front, and he's singing, "Nelson is free, Nelson is free." And I'm saying, "Oh, you finished work for the week or whatever, what's going on?" And he's like, no, Mandela is free. And we're just like, what? And I had nothing on me. I had no notebook or anything, and we're in filthy old clothes. And I said, "Look, can you just take us let's get us into the township and into Soweto." And so we headed in, but of course, your crowds were massive, and they were building. And Mandela went back to his little original house, not the big mansion that Winnie had built. And so this original little house, and everyone had said he would get assassinated if he was released. And so he just Nelson, the driver, let us off as close as he could get, and we walked in, and there were just literally the world. This was before laptops, so you had the sort of vans with satellites, and the world press was there, and I guess you had there were sort of ANC black bodyguards with their guns, and then you would have had sort of white police with their guns as well, all sort of trying to protect this tiny little house. And I think a Irish journalist or photographer gave me some film for our camera and a notebook, and there was Mandela sitting in the middle of quietly sitting in the middle of his courtyard doing interviews.
Yeah.
And the place was just happy, and even coming out of it, like everyone said, "Oh, you don't travel in Soweto and you don't get into black taxis," well, everyone was just unbelievably happy, and we were travelling out by the time we'd finished, and we were in the back of this really crowded, so black taxis are like those vans, they're full of us, we're just full, and this white cop pulls it over, because I used to pull them over often to check, because they used to often be unlicensed and they were just really death traps, and he pulled it over, and then he spotted these whiteys in the back, and he was like, "Are you all right? What are you doing in there?" And we said, no, we're all good, we're just we're Australian. I remember that was when you could just say we're Australian and it was all right. And you weren't American or something, and you weren't English or it was an incredibly hopeful time. You could walk through Johannesburg at 10 o'clock at night in centre Johannesburg, and you were safe. So I think we were really very lucky.
Should we shut the door to prevent the leaf blower from intruding momentarily?
Your recording's going to sound so...
So what? So great. So lifelike. This is real life. Back from intermission.
Okay.
Coming towards the end, Kathleen.
Yes.
So I take it you're enjoying yourself, having built this career around words and meeting people and talking to people and writing it all down. Is it what you thought it would be, journalism, at that time?
No, not at all. It's just been surprising at every turn. I'm not a planner. I don't sort of plan, steps in a career or anything like that. And you just tend to say yes. I tend to say yes to things as often as I can, and you just see what comes out of that. And I think you got to, it might be the wrong way of going about it, but I think you just got to follow your heart sometimes.
You came back from South Africa to Brisbane, to the Courier?
To the Courier. So the nice thing was we bounced back between seasons. When the cricket season went over, we would come back to Australia and I would work at the Courier-Mail for a couple of months and earn some money, and then keep a hand in or keep my contacts here, which was very nice, and they'd take you back each time. So I'm really very grateful of that. There was some really, I've had some wonderful different sort of deputy editors and news editors there over the years. And then I'd go back again, and then spent a stint in England, and then we finally came back to Australia, and I went back to the Courier-Mail, and I went back as a it might have been a section editor or features writer, I can't remember.
Something different to try your hand at, or to specialise in, feature writing, or you've done a bit of that elsewhere?
I'd done a bit of that. I'd done some travel writing, etc. I hadn't tried feature writing. I don't know. I just tend to do whatever. Someone says, "Do you want to have a go at this?" I'll say, "Yeah, I'll have a go at that." I always really enjoy reading a really great long read. I think they're amazing, and there's a certain arc and there's a certain rhythm in them which can just make you utterly forget everything else that's going on, and you are changing your opinion the whole way through. And I think there's something brilliant about that.
What's the difference between daily news reporting, those kind of short who, what, when, where, why, how stories, versus a 2,000, 3,000 word plus feature? It's a different reading experience, certainly, but when it comes to writing, what have you noticed over the years about those different styles?
Well, look, I think for me, you have to a lot of the time, tell one person's story. You've got to sort of take the reader's hand and say, this is big issue what you want to explore, and say whether it's domestic violence or whatever it is, and this is the person who you're going to follow through this story. I think at the essence of every sort of good piece is being moved or outraged for one person. And I also the very clever feature writer, and there's many of them out there. They can to me they tend to write it in a circle. They tend to start somewhere. They tend to take you a lot of other places, and you're not quite sure where they're going with all that, but they're giving you all the other sides, and then you find yourself coming back and almost completing that circle. I often find that's very satisfying, and I find that's a very satisfying way to write.
Yes, the arc, the all-important arc. Well, what's the future hold for you as a writer? I would love for you to continue writing The Last Word as long as you live.
I don't know. I've got no idea, actually. I don't know what the future of newspapers is. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I have no idea.
Is that exciting or anxiety-inducing?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes that fills you with a lot of terror. No, I don't think so at all. I think that's, I think you just, I've never lived my life with sort of making plans and ticking things off. So I will just see what comes up. Whether people get bored with you, or whether your newspaper goes, okay, well, just because really, if you're as a columnist, you live your life constantly under an axe, and you're fooling yourself if you think you don't. And a long time ago, a very lovely deputy editor said to me, He said, Kath, they focus group all the time, and if you focus group really badly, they'll tell you about it, and if you focus group really, really well, they'll never tell you about it because you'll ask for more money. So, you know, and that's newspapers. So, I don't know what the future will hold.
Just on money, has that increased over the years as your tenure as a columnist has increased?
Yes, it has. But I also never ask anyone else what they get, and I never compare it to anyone else, because either way someone's going to be disappointed. You know what I mean? So I think you write what you write, you be satisfied with what you get, and you won't be bitter and twisted. It's like when you work for an organisation or in a newsroom or whatever. When you start to get, just before you start to get too bitter and twisted, you need to leave. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, you just actually will take the experience for yourself. And and whereas I've seen a lot of journalists who, they might have been somewhere for 10 years. For 8 of those years, they really had a ball, and for the last 2, they didn't. And that has really sort of, that really, they ended up leaving sort of very, very cranky. And I think there's no point to doing that. If you're not having fun, you just need to go. Hope there's somewhere to go to.
Well, I take it you're still having fun.
I think I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to do it. Isn't that ridiculous?
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a good attitude to have. Like, the minute you think you've mastered something, that's kind of when you should be taken out to pasture and shot.
You really do, because sometimes I'll read a piece or an essay or a column by someone, and I'll think, there's a beautiful trick there. There's a beautiful thing they've done. And sometimes you'll even try and pull it apart to look at the magic or how it worked, and it's like taking a cobweb apart, you know. But sometimes you can see how it's worked. And you think, boy, don't write anymore. Throw away the laptop when you read something really good.
But isn't that the amazing thing about writing, though, that there's like an infinite number of stories out there, and seemingly infinite number of ways to tell them. And even after a whole career in journalism and being a reader, a lifelong of being a reader, you can still be amazed and enthralled by something that inspires you or makes you want to throw your laptop away. And isn't that just the joy of being a reader?
Yeah, absolutely. I still get so excited if I read a paragraph or a sentence that is so good that you'll read it out to the person next to you, or I'll read it twice, or I dog-ear all books from the bottom if this is something I want to quote, or I'm interested, or that was really good, and then the top I dog-ear to show myself where I'm at the normal dog-ear, right? So all these books have got these terrible dog-ears all over the bottom of them, because I just think, and then I can still go back today and go, what did I like on that page? And I know what it was. Yeah, it'll be a sentence or something. I
do the exact same thing. The bottom dog ear. With just you might do it only a handful of times in an entire book, but just something that makes you go, wow, I've never thought of that, or that's a great quote, or just a great sentence.
Or that was a feeling I had, and I actually never had the words to say what it was, and that person has said it. I just find that just amazing.
All right, well, when I first contacted you for an interview on this podcast, you said you'd think about it and that nobody is interesting for 90 minutes, but you've been interesting for about 101. So thank you for talking to me, Kathleen.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Penmanship, and thank you to my guest, Kathleen Noonan. You can find show notes to this episode and all previous episodes at penmanshippodcast.com. If you'd like to contact me, you may do so via andrew@penmanshippodcast.com. You can follow the podcast on Twitter @penmanshipau, or you can find it on Facebook. If you'd like to support this show, the best way to do so is to review it on iTunes and share it with people in your life who love great Australian writing. The theme song to this podcast, as ever, is Eternally Yours by Laughing Clowns. That's it for now. Till next time.